I called Mama. She was so happy she cried. She wants you to have her wedding gown. It's white lace.
Yeah, that's good. I can't get married in your mother's dress.
You are wonderful. Thank you. I've worked hard to become so. I admit it, you are better than I am. Then why are you smiling? Because I know something you don't know. And what is that? I am not left-handed.
Well, sir, you were a cowardly son of a bitch. You just shot an unarmed man.
Well, he should have harmed himself. He's gonna decorate his saloon with my friend.
Whoa, right on me.
It's you.
What's that supposed to mean?
Because you're the boy. You are what's behind the mirror in Phantasm.
Oh, that's scary.
Now it can be revealed.
Now
I'm
you know.
Mark.
And I'm Tom.
And we're the Cinemaniacs.
Yes.
So I love Phantasm.
Oh, it's great.
I'm out of sorts because I had no idea that
well,
clip
and
was gonna
of
come
all
up.
you go back and you see all of the, like, real classic horror movies, for how many have been redone? Friday the 13th, Nightmare on Elm Street, Exorcist hasn't yet. And that was more of a cultural phenomenon, I think.
Yeah.
I don't know if it would work now. But I'm surprised Phantasm hasn't been done. But and as I'm sure you appreciate, we're going to talk about Phantasm.
That's right, we have time.
The campiness of it was what's so much fun.
It was intentionally light and fun. And there's a new one coming, actually. It's called Phantasm Ravager.
Oh, really?
And it's the 5th Phantasm. It originally started off as a web series. So I'm a little shaky on this. It was intended for the web a while ago, but all the original cast, and it continues the story from where Phantasm 4 left off.
It'll be interesting to see if, because as I recall, there have been how many, 3 of them so far?
There have been 4, this will be the 5th.
Okay. And this isn't a negative comment, the quality hasn't kept up.
Yeah.
The visual quality, which I kind of appreciated. Maybe, and the reason I say that is Walter and I, my younger son he loves zombie movies. So started with, I actually rented a bunch of Romero's newer stuff.
Right. Survival
Survival of the Dead and Island of the Dead and things like that. And he said, well, let's watch the first one. He wanted to watch the black and white Night of the Living Dead, which was such a terrific movie. I'd forgotten that. But it was funny to watch Night of the Living Dead in, what was that,
68?
Something like that, 67, 68, and the quality of it. And then you see his newer stuff that's just slick as all get out and looks so super great. It loses some of the quaintness of a zombie movie.
Some of the terror when it looks so Hollywood
It is
big
kind of
budgety.
that, yeah, too.
So anyway,
Enough
we
talk
didn't-
about 60s.
We didn't come here to talk about Phantasm.
No, we didn't.
But we could.
Talk about some fantastic stuff.
Oh, sure.
If
hey.
there is anything.
Well, that's up to us or the viewers to decide ultimately, I guess.
Well, we can let them know
Sure.
what we think, because isn't that really what? Then I'll start off with following a bunch of kids, a bunch of young boys who happen to have some dulcet-like tones down south, if you happen to live in New Hampshire, which is where I live, and follow up the life and times of Frankie Valli and all of his compatriots, because they are the Jersey Boys.
So,
Yes?
as anybody who watches this show knows, I like to give a little preamble before I give an opinion.
Of
a
course.
little context. I grew up listening to Four Seasons tape, Greatest Hits, in our car as a kid.
Okay.
So I'm
Probably
very
an
familiar.
8-track.
No, audio cassette.
Really?
And this was a K-Tel album. So this was all of their early stuff up to their late 70s stuff.
Right.
So I'm familiar with all of it. So I didn't know their story before I saw this movie.
Okay.
And going into this, I said to myself and anybody who would bother to listen, even if this movie is terrible, I know the music's going to be good.
Right.
So I knew I was not going to not enjoy all of this. If that makes any sense. Anyway, personally, I thought this was a little lifeless for how good the music is. And again, when all is said and done, I enjoyed the music tremendously, even if I think the renditions aren't as good as the original recordings. If you sit through the credits, you actually get the original recordings for 2 or 3 songs, which we did. I had my parents come down, and Cricket was with me, so damn near the whole family sat there. We sat through the whole credits because songs you love in the best stereo system you've ever sat in front of. My parents loved it. My father said this is the best movie he's seen in a long time because this is their era. And I think this movie arguably is going to work better for people who remember the Four Seasons and the 50s, early 60s, because this is when the film takes place.
Right.
And it's a nice recreation of that era. Directed by Clint Eastwood, which was shocking to me when I saw that.
Did you not know that going in?
I found that out about 2 days ago, and I said,
okay.
wow, I'm really intrigued, because he's never done a musical before. He was in Paint Your Wagon,
Right.
If you want to go
well,
that.
and he directed Bird.
He directed
so
Bird.
we know he likes
Okay.
music. But yeah, this was a strange one for him to tackle.
Because what this is based on the Broadway musical
Mm-hmm.
that's been a huge hit, has toured and has installations all over the country, which is referred to as a jukebox musical. It's a term I learned recently, which is you take somebody's songbook of all their hits, or all the hits of a certain genre, and you kind of craft a story around songs people already know.
Right.
My understanding, I've done a little reading since I saw this, is that this expands on the musical. This is more of a biography of Frankie Valli and the Four Seasons than the musical was.
Okay.
But you do get all the songs that you hear in the film in full, which is cool. So if they start Sherry, you're going to hear all of it.
Right.
So that's nice. So you can enjoy that. Interesting that he cast all but one of the Four Seasons in this film are people who were from the Broadway or one of the live stage productions of it. And a lot of the cast in this originated the roles on stage or performed the roles on stage, and Eastwood has been criticized for not casting movie stars in this movie, and he's like, who better than somebody who's got 1,200 performances in to know what the character is going to be about? So everybody, and apparently they recorded all the singing live on set, like the Les Mis film did.
Okay.
So it's all them doing it. So for me, it was interesting because I didn't know the story of the Four Seasons. I always expect any biopic that it's going to be simplified and it's going to be a little, not completely the truth. From what I've read, this is actually very accurate. There's some condensed things and some simplification, but it's a nice recreation of the era, to me.
Certainly is.
At times, it felt a little cheap. There are certain moments where it felt like I was watching a TV movie in terms of it didn't have that Hollywood gloss. It didn't seem as big as a movie I'm sitting down to watch it.
Okay.
And there are times where I felt like it was very dead, like not as exciting as it should be. During the musical numbers where they're performing, there are big moments in their life or career, and they're performing a big song, and it's something about the camera angles and the cutting. I wanted to feel more wrapped up with the crowd and really wanted to be on my feet, and I wasn't. And it was really, a lot of it was the goodwill I have toward this music that carried me through the movie and made me enjoy the movie. The lead is interesting. He reminds me distractingly of if young Bruno Kirby and young Rob Morrow from Northern Exposure had a child, it would be this guy.
Yes.
And he did the performing well, but as far as his acting goes, he always seemed kind of like a sad sack in this movie.
Yeah.
And to me, Frankie Valli always had a sense of confidence on stage whenever in any performance clips that you saw, a little bit more personality than you saw here. Having said all that, it was a lot of fun. It was funny, much funnier. I mean, toward early on, when you see sort of the criminal pastime of some of these guys, a heist doesn't quite go right, and it had us all laughing out loud at how wacky and cartoony something happened was. So overall, I think it's a decent movie. I wish it was a lot better than it is. I think it may have been the struggle between trying to represent the stage show and trying to make a movie out of the stage show.
Okay.
Because the end of the film is clearly a film representation of
Very
how the
much
show
so, yeah.
ends. And as you see the opening credits, you hear what I believe is the overture from the show, which when I realized that, I'm like, oh, this is kind of cool.
Yeah.
And they do certain things that I could tell this is what they did on stage. So I don't think this is a success. I think there's a lot of Broadway musicals turned into movies that have been done better than this. But in the end, if this brings the music of the Four Seasons to more people, or reminds people of how amazingly great their songbook is, then I'm all for it. Like I was saying just as we were watching the trailer, I have not had one of their songs in my head, including right now, since I saw this movie on Sunday afternoon.
Well,
and it makes me want to listen to it all again.
You talk about bringing it to new kids, new people. My 13-year-old went to see it with me. I was a little surprised he wanted to see it. I said,
I was surprised
do you want to come
my son
see
did.
it? Sure, he did. And he enjoyed it, but afterwards, as he was doing a whole bunch of math homework and everything like that, he kind of came down to complain to me that he couldn't get Sherry out of his head. And so he certainly was familiar with it. I agree with the vast, vast majority of your comments. What I found and would like to pick up on was your comment about it not seeming maybe movie worthy, or it wasn't all that involving.
It didn't seem as cinematic as I maybe had hoped it would be.
Right, and I had that same feeling, and I hate to say this, and this may show my ignorance of movie, not movie history, but music history. But for me, there didn't seem to be a lot of conflict, and as a dramatic piece, as a motion picture, I want to see that. Yeah, there was the majority of the conflict seemed to be them arguing back and forth. There's each of the Four Seasons plays a particular kind of role. One is an agent, one is kind of the money guy, one's the lyricist, all that kind of stuff. And the majority of the conflict seemed to be between Tommy who was the money guy, and obviously we find out he was doing things he wasn't supposed to be doing with the money, and the rest of the band. And is that enough for me for 2 hours? I don't think so. I mean, it wasn't really all that long. And so this is where I'll get to, and those of you who know music history, you can lambaste me if you like. I was just surprised that you're going to do an entire movie, and I know this Broadway musical was very popular, on Frankie Valli and the Four Seasons. Are they big enough to handle that? And what a strange choice, and for some reason, maybe it's because I like him so much, I thought Clint Eastwood was a very strange choice to direct this.
Originally, Jon Favreau, I read. Which would be
the director of the Iron Man.
An equally strange choice.
Yeah,
I think Frankie Valli and the Four Seasons, if you look at their body of work, at their greatest hits, so to speak, it is astounding how many amazing songs they had.
Yeah, I think.
But is their story so amazing? And maybe it could have been made to seem more impressive if executed differently.
A couple things I agree with and liked about this movie is you're right. When they start a song, it's not a snippet and you cut away. It's the whole song. And I was left with, after this, because I didn't know, once again, I didn't know a whole lot about Frankie Valli. If you say Frankie Valli, it's Grease to me, because that's kind of the era I grew up in, and I certainly know of the Four Seasons, but I was stunned at the end of the movie to realize how many great songs they had done, and I just didn't think that, so that certainly brings it up. Ultimately, I thought it was I think you're right that it's fun. It was interesting that we start at back in the 50s and even earlier than that, with how innocent a time it was. They do some, I mean, they're trying to rob this place of this huge heavy safe, and comedic hijinks ensue, but nothing really bad happens, and it seemed like kind of a lighter time. So one of the nice things was I never felt a real threat to anybody. It was, and this is what Eastwood is great at. I thought all of the performances were terrific, and Eastwood is an actor's director. He lets them take over. It was interesting. I didn't know that they certainly all seemed to embody the characters really well. And it was interesting to learn, as you were telling us, that they had played the roles on Broadway. So I thought overall the majority of the leads were just terrific. I thought it was very interesting, and you're right, very enjoyable. It was a fun piece, and I in particular loved the end number when don't leave, and you don't even have an opportunity to leave. Right. When the credits start rolling, and they're all coming out and singing their greatest hits, and they're dancing and everything, and it was just so much fun that it was a great way to end it too. So ultimately, I think I agree with you. Maybe a little disappointed. Couldn't you have done more story-wise? And that's an odd comment, I know, since it's based on reality and, what do you want them to do? Like invade Russia or something like that? I don't think so. The Four Seasons would have done really well.
They would have been a great secret weapon, by the way.
Yes, right, exactly. So I was a little disappointed, but in the long run, I think, and as you know, I'm less demanding of my movies when they're on home video. I think I'm going to really fall in love with this on home video because it'll bring the great music to it. It's not something that needs the big scope of a theater, although I think you're right that the sound might really help it. Walken was a strange interlude as this kind of mafioso fairy angel, guardian angel of theirs. So it was just a strange movie, but I enjoyed it, and it was certainly very well made, and performances and music were great.
And it's rated R, so people know that, which I was surprised. It's solely for language.
Yeah.
So, and it's an F here and there, basically. So hopefully this won't keep people from going to see it who want to see it. I think it's unfortunate that they couldn't have trimmed it back a little for PG-13.
You certainly could have trimmed that, I think.
Not that kids are really going to want to see this, but I think it would be cool for kids to see this.
Sure.
Just to know what good music sounds like. So that's all we had in the theater this week.
Yes, we want to thank Joe and Suzanne and Trevor and everybody there.
All the gang at Keene.
Yes, the whole gang.
And then we move on on our thankathon to thank our friends at Video Headquarters. Quarters? That's not a word. Headquarters for the titles which we are about to elucidate and enunciate and proclamate on. If you can do that before 10 o'clock.
It's easy for him to say.
Yeah, I try. So first up, we have the sequel to a big, huge, manly man type picture with a little something extra for the ladies. It is titled 300, Rise of an Empire.
Just watch that 3 or 4 times and you've kind of got the movie. Not that I'm prejudging it.
Let me do my impression. Let me review this as the film.
Yes? Exactly.
Sorry. What a load of crap this was. Sorry, I'm channeling Lee. I didn't like the first 300. I thought it was lame and silly. And if you want to look at greasy men with oily chests in slow motion and their rippling bulges, then that's going to be the movie for you in slow motion. And this is just more of the same. This takes place parallel to, a little bit before and parallel to the previous 300, so it actually does crisscross. A couple characters in common with the first film. This is about the sea battle that was going on during the land battle of the movie 300 that you previously may have seen. And, you know, I guess if you like the first one, I can't imagine you wouldn't like this because it's really more of the same, but with different characters. Maybe more nudity, female in this than the first one, from what I recall. Very gory, like guts and slashings and slicings and loads of CGI blood. And I don't know how many seconds go by in this film where there isn't blood or water or something splattering on the camera lens.
Yes, exactly.
It's not a documentary, but there's a camera lens there, by the way. And mist on this. It just looks like a badly shot movie on a boat, you know what I mean? And everything is backlit and gauzy and hazy. And this is really not my kind of movie. So if you liked it, if you liked the first one, you probably like this. And if you didn't, I can't imagine this is going to change your opinion.
I have to agree completely. I actually did. I didn't like the first 300 much at all, and for some reason I either didn't recognize it or had forgotten. But one of my favorite actors, Gerard Butler, was the star.
Oh yeah.
And so
I'd
then since 300 seen a lot of other movies that I really ended up liking him in all of it. So I went back and rewatched it before I saw this in the theaters, and while I still didn't like 300 a whole lot, because for the exact same reason that I kind of don't like this one, and it's exactly what you elucidate. It's the in-your-face, unbelievable special effects, and so clearly done on a green screen and all of that. I have a lot of respect for it. Wow, that couldn't have been easy to make, but, you know, come on, can't you do more with it? But so it was so in your face and so obvious, you know, like 3D attempts, or, you know, the blood splattering on the lens and the mist and everything that you cite is so in your face that it takes me out of the movie. Interesting performances. The lead actress is lovely and very good, and kind of nice that they finally turned some things around and have a strong female character. In as much as I had gone back and rewatched the original 300, I sort of enjoyed a couple of the little crossovers. Those were kind of fun, but it wasn't enough to keep me going. I think you're absolutely right. If you liked the first one, I think you're going to like this one a lot because you get the exact same thing given the stylistics that are there, and that's clearly what you say 300, that's all I think about.
Right.
Are those styles and big slow motion axes chopping off slow motion heads.
Which could be cool on occasion, but it's done so much, and even in the trailer, it becomes silly and ridiculous.
Right,
after
you
a
hear the voice going in slow motion and everything. It does kind of become, and they could have a lot of fun, like doing a tongue-in-cheek third one, which you know have got to come out because these made so much money.
Well, there was Rise of the Spartans years ago.
Right. Yeah.
Something about the Spartans.
Right.
It was one of those movies about this, but anyway.
Right. So anyway, I think the ultimate thing to say is exactly what you said. If you liked the first one, I think you're going to like this one a lot. If you didn't, then you can move on and watch something else that we might talk about later, which would be the next one. And true love conquers all and is unending. And in New York City, we have a mythic tale of good versus evil and love overcoming all. And we would call this Winter's Tale. So terrific cast: Colin Farrell, Russell Crowe, Will Smith, believe it or not, William Hurt.
Yeah.
So it's got a terrific
Eva Marie
cast.
Saint.
Eva Marie Saint, right? And we'll talk about her later on. And looked beautiful. So this is a real kind of tearjerker of a film in many respects.
Romantic drama.
Yeah, absolutely. I like Farrell, so I went into this in the theaters. Didn't get a chance to rewatch this on video. I kind of wanted to because I have some logic questions about some of the characters. It is a story where Farrell's character is able to, he's just immortal, essentially. And he outlives everybody, but he falls in love with this one woman, and they get separated, as fate will have, and then later has the opportunity to possibly rekindle that or recapture that or find somebody new, etc. I don't want to give away too much. It just kind of, it had a great concept that just didn't work out for me, I think. In particular, Eva Marie Saint plays a woman whom he knew, a much younger version, obviously, in the past. And this is stupid, but it's the indication of a film that doesn't grip you and keep you in its clutches, that I had the time and was distanced enough to think that, wait a minute, he knew Eva Marie Saint's character at this age, and this much time has passed. She should be 180 or something like that. I mean, it was way older than she should have been.
She may sleep in formaldehyde every night.
That's possible too, just like, we won't say that. So there were those kinds of weirdo logic questions. It was very pretty. But in the long run, I think this is based on a fairly well-known novel.
I think so.
And it had a big following, and a lot of people went to see it for that reason. Nothing wrong with it. It just, given the caliber of the performers, clearly the money behind it, I think it could have had a little bit more oomph and meant a little bit more for me.
This is probably one of those instances where a book can't translate to the screen in 2 hours.
Right.
And retain all of the magic of the book. Let's give it the benefit of the doubt that if it was a popular book, the writer must have done something right. And for me, it didn't work. I didn't know much about this going in. So when the supernatural elements started coming forward, I was like, Russell Crowe is the head of a gang of demons in New York City.
Oh, and who's his boss?
His boss is Will Smith, who is the devil. How does Will Smith portray the devil? Will Smith portrays the devil as though he just stepped out of his Maserati, walked onto the set in his blazer and Jimi Hendrix t-shirt, delivered a few lines, and then left.
Well, he stands up in this like barrister's costume or something. It's like this weird legal thing where Russell Crowe has to defend his actions. It's just silly. That whole bit was absolutely silly.
It was ridiculous. And I'm watching this movie, and it's sacrilege to anybody who loves the book, I'm sure, but I'm thinking if you could take the supernatural elements out of this somehow and still craft this would be a really decent love story drama. Because the stuff with Colin Farrell and the woman he's in love with and all of their circumstance, sort of the high class versus low class echelons of society, was really well done and it was really well shot. And then you have this goofy stuff about a Pegasus and all this. And I'm like, this is just foolish.
Right.
So Winter's Tale will work for some people. Not me, and maybe not you so much, but maybe young type females who want a romantic fantasy film who aren't going to be really hard on the facts and how silly it might be, and they get wrapped up in the romance and timelessness of it, let's say.
Right.
Which is my way of saying
You didn't like it.
I didn't like it.
Nor did I. Okay.
So, speaking of films,
Yes.
while we're here, up next is the story of two brothers. One a cop in 70s New York, the other a robber in 70s New York. And what brings them together and tears them apart is none other than blood ties.
Absolutely. Morals to these stories.
Yeah. This is, I like this. This is not, I can see why it didn't get a theatrical release. It's not like a Hollywood cop movie or crime drama. I wouldn't call it an art house movie. It's really a throwback to 70s cop movies like Serpico and 7-Ups and stuff like that. Although 7-Ups was a bit more action-oriented, maybe French Connection, where it's about the police work and it's about the families and it's about just people. It's not about, a chase along an elevated train track or jumping motorcycles off rooftops. Well, that stuff's pretty cool. This is about people and interpersonal relationships. And you have Billy Crudup and you have Clive Owen, and Clive Owen is the gangster, not a gangster, but a criminal. And they've had this long give and take relationship of, so when you're put in this spot where you're a cop and your brother is doing something wrong, what do you do? Do you turn him in? Do you let him go? And how does that result and impact everybody's lives around you? So this was, I thought, good. I mean, as I just said before you heard it, it can't hold a candle to the films it was inspired by, but it's nice to see a movie like this.
Right.
And I like that era, so it was cool. Although... The movie starts off and it says, New York City, 1973. A needle is dropped on a record, and it's Ace Frehley doing New York Groove, which was released in 1978. Not everybody's going to know that, but I did, and I'm like, well, this is wrong. This movie's wrong right out of the gate. What are you doing?
Great way to start.
I'm not even sure that was the first song on side 1 or 2. Come on. Other than that, there's a lot of good music in this movie.
Yeah, there is.
Aside from that, and it's pretty gritty. It looks almost like it could have been made back then. There's not a lot that rings false. A lot of times I'll watch films, including Jersey Boys, and the haircuts will be off. They'll say it's a certain year, and I'll be like, people didn't wear their hair that way then, or whatever. And I wasn't even there. But I thought Blood Ties is a pretty solid movie, pretty solid rental. I would recommend to people who like a solid drama or cop movie.
Right. You talk about it being gritty, that the text and its approach to this film is very gritty, and the visual style, and I think obviously that's intentional. You could have it been looking really super slick. I mean, but I think it's appropriate. Real fine performances. I think the two leads are fine. I've always liked Clive Owen. Surprising big name people like Jimmy Caan in this. So supporting cast is real good. Interesting that two movies, this one and the last one we'll be talking about, shot in Canada. And I don't know if I'm being hypersensitive to that, but it just kind of looked like it in many respects. So that took me out a little
Sometimes
bit.
you can spot it.
But I hadn't heard of this because obviously, as you say, it wasn't released in theaters. And I thought this of the Video Express releases is certainly one of the better ones I've seen in a few years because, as you say, it's about the characters. I mean, it's about there's action stuff and there's shootouts and things like that. But it's as you say, a gritty crime drama with some dramatic import for our characters. And so I thought Blood Ties was a nice surprise, and I think it's worth picking up, especially if again, if you see the trailer and you find it interesting, I think you're going to get that. I think it's certainly worthwhile.
Cool.
One that you're probably not necessarily going to see too often. I, strangely enough, and he can blame me for this one because I have the unusual, never-before-seen release that will be available on video. I'm not sure if it's going to be available at our friends at Video Headquarters, but I encourage them to get it because I picked this one up at a big retail store that I'll admit that I'm a sucker for advertising. And this one advertised that if I liked things like Shaun of the Dead, I'd probably really enjoy it. So if you're in a Scandinavian country and the dead people happen to start coming back, the thing you want to do is kill zombie. Okay. Strangely enough, you'll notice that for the most part, there wasn't a lot of dialogue in this, at least in this trailer, and that's because it's in Dutch. I couldn't believe when I picked this up, I'm popping it in, and they're saying something, and it's not English, and subtitles are under there, and I'm going, this is unusual because I didn't have my glasses on when I bought the Blu-ray. Strangely enough, and this tells you folks, if you're familiar with the show, you know that I don't have the greatest parental supervision for my son. So Walter wanted to watch it. He loves zombie movies, so we went ahead and watched it, and it's pretty funny. It's the effects are cheesy, but intentionally so. It's about this group of essentially criminals. These guys are arrested, not on trumped-up charges, but on real minor charges. But they're put in jail when this big, huge comet hits and turns everybody into zombies. They get out, and they have to fight with a couple of cops, one really well-endowed, blonde Dutch cop, and she leads them all throughout the town, and eventually they're picked off. So it's the same typical old zombie stuff that you're going to see. Effects are really cheesy, but it's pretty funny. And so if you've got the chance, I'll recommend, and I'll be letting you borrow my copy of this because I know you're dying to see it.
Well, after that trailer.
Yes, absolutely. So I thought Kill Zombie was really sort of funny. So
good.
That's my little quickie there.
I know not of it.
Okay.
But I tell you what I do know.
Yes.
And I think you know all well enough too.
Yes.
What do you do? You tell me, what do you do?
I do know what we do.
When you are a mild-mannered college professor, see, you do know.
I do.
And you suddenly realize that there is somebody who looks just like you living in your town. Is this person friend or enemy? Now, is there a technical term for that in cinematography? It's a visual style that's been around for a while. I get choked up about these matters.
I know, it's a choking film.
Pardon me being crude, but this is late enough in the show. It looks like it was shot through a bottle of urine. You know what I mean?
Okay.
It's those, I won't say what I usually call it, but those yellowish, ambery tones.
And it's not like a sepia. I wasn't looking at that.
Yeah, the whole movie was shot that way, and it kind of bugs me.
It's hard to see. This film is, a lot of it is hard to see.
Some of it's very dim, and I was wondering if it's my monitor, but it was, Joe last week was the same way. There were sections of it that were dim, and I'm just like squinting to try to make out anything. I didn't really like this, ultimately.
Okay.
It was a very intriguing premise going in, and for a while I'm like, ooh, this feels like a Twilight Zone episode, and to me that's always a good thing. But then it kind of goes nowhere. It's so much of bored, somewhat sad-looking people staring out windows for long shots, or driving and not talking, or just, I always used to say all the Merchant Ivory posters were the same because it was two people back-to-back staring unhappily off into the distance.
In front of a big window.
Yeah, in front of a big window. And this movie feels like that. And ultimately, it starts getting more intense and weird, and then there's this last shot which is bizarre, and it's like, boom, credits, and I'm like, I won't say what I said, but I expletive something toward the TV set because it's like,
Yes.
come on, you can't make things this complex and then end and
Right.
not tie anything up. And then it's just like somewhat jolly music while we see shots of the city and the credits roll. Like,
Right.
didn't you have a good time? Gyllenhaal's good in this, and the actors in it are good. You saw Isabella Rossellini, and her name slips my mind, but the actress who played Shoshana in Inglourious Bastards, the woman who ran the movie
Right,
theater,
right.
plays the girlfriend of the Gyllenhaal teacher character in this. But it's just kind of shoegazing and kind of goes in circles after a while and doesn't make a lot of sense and then ends.
Right.
And I, as I often do if I don't like a movie, I go online to see what other people said about it to just see if anybody, to see if anybody agrees with me, but also because that makes me feel better if I'm not like the only one who didn't like it. But then I read all these theories about what all this means, and if you watch it 2 or 3 times, it makes sense, and if you do research, it makes sense. And I'm like, no, movie has to work between when it starts and when it stops.
Right.
There are things that gain with repeat viewings, but life is too short to rewatch movies you don't like since they make more sense. So I really didn't like this. If anybody sees Jake Gyllenhaal's huge mug on the cover of this disc, which is that's how they're selling this, don't think you're getting happy-go-lucky him or an action movie or anything like that. You're getting an art house wank-off. Because this is just, it's sort of, it bugged me. It made me mad because it weaves this intricate web, literally, and then stops.
Right.
And is like, and so it can go take a leap as far as I'm concerned.
I'm not quite as down on it as you are. Fortunately, you had kind of forewarned me that this was slow. And so it is very, very slow. Very little movie music. What there is this very dissettling, discordant music. And so it's not real long. It's like 92 minutes or something like that.
I think it's not even 90.
If even that. But you're right. I mean, we follow this Gyllenhaal's character. He has 2 characters. One is this history professor, and the history professor is constantly talking to his students about how times repeat themselves. Things always happen in 2s, blah, 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 blah. And so then, strangely enough, later on, he's watching this movie. This fellow instructor is talking to him, and it strikes up a conversation, and it's talking about, oh, do you like movies, blah, blah, blah. So he recommends this one movie, and Gyllenhaal watches this movie and sees himself in it. And so he pursues this guy, finds out who this actor is, and now that's when we started taking up these 2 Gyllenhaals, the history teacher and the third-rate actor. The history teacher has a girlfriend, the third-rate actor has a pregnant wife, I'm assuming. But even before that, the very first shot of the film and the scene of the film, and we see it briefly in it, is this very strange underground cult club where these naked women are writhing all over the places and they're disfigured, and these old men are sitting in the shadows watching them. So this whole thing, and maybe because you forewarned me about it, I found it intriguing enough to keep my interest throughout the entire film. And so we get about just before the end of the movie, and we've had hints of other people who attended this weird cult thing. Oh, that they didn't send me a key. I don't have a key. I can't get in the new one, and they move it around everywhere. Gyllenhaal gets this key, like at the last scene. And I'm like, finally, you're going to wrap it up. This is going to be great. And he goes, history Gyllenhaal, history teacher Gyllenhaal, they both switch roles kind of, intentionally taking over I'm going to give it away. So if you don't want to hear this, give me a couple of minutes. And you can go away and I'll do this to call you back. But so they switch roles, and the third-rate actor thinks that the history Gyllenhaal has done bad things to his wife. And so he's going to go do bad things to history teacher Gyllenhaal's girlfriend. So while that's happening, history teacher Gyllenhaal is with the actor's wife. He finds this key, and I'm thinking, great, everything's going to make sense. And then you refer to this last shot where things just go completely bluey. And you swore, I said something like, what the hell did I just watch? That entire movie. And so with the exception of, and you can come back now, with the exception of a 1930s experimental expressionistic film called Un Chien Andalou,
or Meshes of the Afternoon.
With Salvador Dali stuff in it. I have never seen a weirder movie in my entire life. But I'm intrigued by it. And so I'm probably going to watch this
Maybe
again.
you need to watch it 5 or 6 more times and it'll make sense.
Well, but no, I
me.
completely agree that it's not enough to have to go onto a blog and have people hypothesize as to what things mean. It needs to work for you. And so as a film, I think this is terribly flawed, but it was interesting enough, and I like Gyllenhaal enough that I wasn't nearly as down on it as you were. Enemy, very, very weird. Not
Yeah.
at all mainstream. If you're expecting the Jake Gyllenhaal you find in most of all other motion pictures that he's in, not exactly.
No.
But it was a weird one, and I thought it was worth 90 minutes or whatever it took.
There probably is an audience for this.
Yeah.
It's just not me.
And I don't know if it's me yet.
Well.
Maybe we'll find out on future episodes.
It won't hold a candle to next week's main feature.
Most likely.
It's Transformers 4.
Yes.
In case you didn't.
Very
Fourth,
similar,
right?
you know. I think so, yes.
Yeah, so that'll be a big old loud
Yes,
pile
won't
of
it, though?
scrap metal, won't it?
And we'll have, thanks to Suzanne and our friends at Keene Cinemas, we'll have a little additional accoutrement around the studio. And you can wait until to see that
Something
until
French.
next week. Yes.
So I guess that's really all I had
That's
this
kind of
week.
like it, I guess.
Well, should we?
We might as well.
Okay. I'm Mark.
And I'm Tom.
And we're
The Cinemaniacs.